The afternoon sun beat down on the dusty parking lot of Murphy's Bar and Grill in Cedar Springs, Texas. It was the kind of small town where everyone knew everyone, where gossip traveled faster than the wind across the flatlands, and where strangers stood out like a sore thumb. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell pulled her truck into a spot near the back. She'd driven 3 hours from the naval base in Corpus Christi, hopping for a quiet meal in a town where nobody knew her name or her rank. After 16 years in the Navy, including the last 8 as one of the first female SEALs, Sarah had learned to treasure her moments of anonymity. She was 36 years old, with dark brown hair pulled back in a simple ponytail and gray eyes that had seen more than most people could imagine. At 5'7" and 140 pounds of lean muscle, she didn't look like the Hollywood version of a soldier. She looked like someone's daughter, someone's sister, someone's friend. That was exactly how she preferred it. Sarah stepped out of her truck wearing jeans, a plain white t-shirt, and worn boots. Nothing about her appearance screamed military, and that was intentional. She wanted a burger, maybe a beer, and a couple hours of peace before driving back to base. The interior of Murphy's was exactly what she expected: wood paneling, neon beer signs, a jukebox in the corner playing old country music, and a dozen locals scattered across the bar and booths. A few heads turned when she walked in, the usual small-town curiosity about a new face. Sarah chose a stool at the end of the bar and waited for the bartender, a weathered man in his 60s with kind eyes and a white beard. "What can I get you, miss?" he asked with a genuine smile. "Cheeseburger, medium well, and a Coke, please," Sarah said. "Coming right up." She relaxed slightly, pulling out her phone to check messages from her team. Everything was routine. Training exercises scheduled for next week. Equipment maintenance reports. Nothing urgent. The door swung open behind her, bringing with it the sound of loud laughter. Sarah didn't turn around, but she felt the energy in the room shift. The bartender's smile faded slightly. 3 men walked in, all wearing expensive boots and oversized belt buckles. The kind of men who wanted everyone to know they had money and status in this town. The leader was tall and broad-shouldered, probably in his early 40s, with slick-back hair and a swagger that filled the room. "Tommy," he called out to the bartender, "the usual for me and the boys." "Sure thing, Derek," the bartender replied, his tone careful. Derek Holloway owned the biggest ranch in Cedar County and the largest car dealership in 3 counties. His family had money going back 4 generations, and he made sure nobody forgot it. His 2 companions, Brad and Kyle, were cut from the same cloth: local boys who'd never left town, living off family money and old reputations. They settled into a booth behind Sarah, their voices carrying across the quiet bar. "Did you see that new waitress at the diner?" Brad said, too loud. "Sweet little thing, real polite." "That's how I like 'em," Derek laughed, "pretty and obedient." Sarah's jaw tightened, but she kept her eyes on her phone. This wasn't her town, and these weren't her people. She'd eat her burger and leave. "Speaking of which," Kyle said, lowering his voice just slightly, "you see that girl at the bar, sitting all alone?" Sarah felt their eyes on her back. She'd been in enough situations to recognize the shift in atmosphere, the way predators sized up what they perceived as prey. "Now that's interesting," Derek said. "Don't recognize her, must be passing through." The bartender brought Sarah's Coke, setting it down with an apologetic look that told her he'd heard the conversation too. Small-town dynamics were complicated. Tommy probably couldn't afford to offend Derek Holloway, even if he wanted to. Sarah sipped her drink and waited. She'd handled worse than some small-town bullies. Much worse. "Excuse me, sweetheart," Derek's voice came from directly behind her now. "You look a little lost. This isn't really the kind of place for a lady on her own." Sarah turned slowly on her stool, her expression neutral. Derek stood close enough that she could smell his cologne, something expensive and overdone. His 2 friends flanked him, wearing matching grins. "I'm fine, thank you," Sarah said calmly. "Just here for a burger." "Well, that's real sweet," Derek said, his eyes traveling over her in a way that made her skin crawl. "But a pretty little thing like you shouldn't eat alone. Why don't you join us? We'll take good care of you." He reached out and placed his hand on her waist, his fingers pressing against her side with casual ownership. It was a mistake. Sarah didn't move for a moment. In that brief second, she calculated the situation. 3 men, all bigger than her. A room full of locals who probably wouldn't intervene because Derek Holloway owned half the town. The nearest exit was 10 feet behind her. The closest weapon was a beer bottle on the bar to her right. But more than that, she felt the familiar cold calm that settled over her in dangerous situations. The training that had been drilled into her body and mind for 16 years. The muscle memory of 1,000 combat scenarios. Derek's fingers tightened on her waist, pulling her slightly toward him. "Come on now, don't be shy. We're real friendly here in Cedar Springs." Sarah looked up at him, her gray eyes flat and cold. "I'm going to give you one chance to remove your hand." Derek laughed, a sound full of arrogance. "Oh, she's got some spirit, I like that. Feisty girls are always more fun to break in." His friends chuckled. A few of the other patrons shifted uncomfortably but said nothing. Sarah's voice dropped lower, taking on an edge that anyone with military experience would recognize. "I said, remove your hand." "Or what?" Derek leaned closer, his breath hot on her face. "What's a good girl like you going to do about it?" What happened next took less than 3 seconds. Sarah's left hand came up and clamped down on Derek's wrist with a grip that made his eyes widen in surprise. Before he could react, she twisted his arm, using his own momentum and weight against him. She slid off the bar stool in a fluid motion that spoke of years of hand-to-hand combat training, rotating Derek's body and slamming him face first against the bar. His 2 friends moved forward, but Sarah had already anticipated that. She was a Navy SEAL. Her body was built for war, trained to assess and neutralize multiple threats simultaneously. She released Derek's arm and stepped back into a fighting stance that was deceptively casual. "I don't want any trouble," she said, her voice still calm. "I just want my burger." Derek pushed himself up from the bar, his face red with humiliation and rage. A SEAL learns to read people, and Sarah saw the decision in his eyes before he made it. He was going to attack. He came at her with a wild swing, the kind of punch thrown by someone who'd never faced a real opponent. Sarah slipped under it easily, her body moving with practiced efficiency. She could have ended the fight right there, a strike to his throat, his knee, his solar plexus. Any of a dozen techniques that would put him down and keep him down. But she was trying to de-escalate, trying to avoid causing real harm. Instead, she caught his arm, used his momentum to spin him around, and applied just enough pressure to his shoulder to make him gasp in pain. She guided him down to one knee, controlling him completely. "I don't want to hurt you," Sarah said quietly, "but I will if you don't stop." Brad and Kyle stood frozen, watching their leader being handled like a child by a woman half his size. The entire bar had gone silent except for the jukebox, which continued playing an old Willie Nelson song about angels flying too close to the ground. Derek's face was purple with rage and embarrassment. "You bitch," he spat. "Do you know who I am?" "Don't care," Sarah said. She released him and stepped back, giving him space. "Like I said, I just want my burger." Derek scrambled to his feet, his hand going to his shoulder. For a moment, Sarah thought he might be smart enough to walk away, but pride and humiliation made men stupid. "You're going to regret this," Derek said, his voice shaking with anger. "This is my town. My family runs this county. You just made the biggest mistake of your life." Sarah met his eyes steadily. "I've survived Al-Qaeda, the Taliban, and combat zones in 3 different countries. I think I can handle Cedar Springs, Texas." The words hung in the air. A few people's expressions changed as they processed what she just said. Tommy, the bartender, looked at her with new understanding. Derek's face twisted with contempt. "Oh, you're one of those, a woman playing soldier. That's real cute. My grandfather served in World War II. Real soldiers, not whatever politically correct nonsense they're running now." Sarah felt the familiar sting of words she'd heard 1,000 times before, the assumption that she hadn't earned her place, the dismissal of everything she'd sacrificed and achieved, but she'd learned long ago not to let words wound her. "Your burger's ready," Tommy called out, setting a plate on the bar. Sarah turned away from Derek, sat back on her stool, and picked up her burger. Her hands were steady. Her heart rate was already returning to normal. Years of training and combat had given her complete control over her physical responses. But Derek wasn't done. "This isn't over," he said. "You might think you're tough, but you're in my world now. And in my world, people who disrespect me pay for it." Sarah took a bite of her burger, chewing slowly, not looking at him. The message was clear: "You're not worth my attention." It was the final insult Derek could bear. He stormed toward the door, his friends trailing behind him. Before leaving, he turned back one more time. "Tommy, you tell this bitch she's not welcome in Cedar Springs. And you spread the word: anyone who helps her or serves her is on my bad side." The door slammed behind them. The bar remained quiet for a long moment. Then slowly, conversation resumed, though everyone kept glancing at Sarah. Tommy leaned across the bar, his voice low. "I'm sorry about that, miss. Derek Holloway is, well, he's trouble. He meant what he said about running this county. His family's got connections to the sheriff, the mayor, just about everyone." Sarah met his eyes. "Does that include you?" Tommy was quiet for a moment, then shook his head. "No, ma'am. My daddy taught me to stand up for what's right, even when it's hard. Your money's good here, and you're welcome as long as I'm the one pouring drinks." "Thank you," Sarah said sincerely. As she ate her burger, Sarah couldn't shake the feeling that this chance encounter was about to become more complicated than she'd anticipated. She'd seen men like Derek Holloway before, men with power and pride who couldn't tolerate being challenged, especially by a woman. But Sarah Mitchell was a Navy SEAL. She'd faced down terrorists, survived firefights, and completed missions that would make most people's blood run cold. Whatever Derek Holloway was planning, she'd handle it. What Sarah didn't know was that this small-town bully was about to learn a lesson about what a warrior's body could do when pushed too far. And Cedar Springs, Texas, was about to witness something they'd never forget. Sarah finished her burger in relative peace, though she remained aware of the curious and worried glances from the other patrons. Small towns had a way of making simple events into legendary stories, and she knew that her confrontation with Derek Holloway would be all over Cedar Springs by morning. She paid Tommy, leaving a generous tip, and walked out to her truck. The sun was starting to set, painting the Texas sky in shades of orange and purple. It would be dark before she made it back to base, but that was fine. She'd driven in worse conditions. What Sarah didn't see was the black pickup truck parked across the street, or Derek Holloway sitting in the driver's seat, his phone pressed to his ear, and his face still flushed with anger. She also didn't know that her truck's rear tire had been slashed. Sarah discovered the flat tire about 5 miles outside of town, when the steering started pulling hard to the right. She cursed under her breath and pulled onto the shoulder of the empty highway. The sun had fully set now, and the darkness in rural Texas was absolute. Sarah grabbed her flashlight from the glove compartment and stepped out to assess the damage. The tire was completely shredded, torn as if someone had deliberately cut into it. She pulled out her phone. No signal, of course. Sarah had changed plenty of tires in her life, and she always carried a spare. This was an inconvenience, nothing more. She opened the truck bed to retrieve her jack and spare tire. That's when headlights appeared in the distance, coming from the direction of town. Sarah's instincts kicked in immediately. Something felt wrong. She stepped away from her truck, positioning herself where she could see the approaching vehicle while keeping her own truck between them. The vehicle slowed as it approached, then pulled onto the shoulder behind her. It was a sheriff's cruiser. Sarah's shoulders relaxed slightly. Law enforcement meant help, or at least a phone she could use. She walked toward the cruiser as a man stepped out. Sheriff Jim Dawson was 53 years old, with a beer belly straining against his uniform and the hardened eyes of someone who'd long ago stopped caring about justice. He'd been sheriff of Cedar County for 12 years, elected with the full support and financial backing of the Holloway family. "Evening, ma'am," he said, his tone not friendly. "Having some trouble?" "Flat tire," Sarah said. "I was just about to change it, but if you have a phone I could use, I'd appreciate it. I need to call my base and let them know I'll be late getting back." Dawson's expression shifted slightly at the word base. "You military?" "Yes, sir, Navy. Lieutenant Commander Sarah Mitchell." Dawson pulled out a flashlight and shined it directly in her face, making her squint. It was a power move, an attempt at intimidation. "Well, Lieutenant Commander, I got a call about an assault that happened at Murphy's Bar this evening. Woman matching your description attacked Derek Holloway unprovoked." Sarah kept her voice calm and professional. "That's not accurate, Sheriff. Derek Holloway put his hands on me without permission. I defended myself using minimal necessary force. There were at least a dozen witnesses." "That's not what I heard," Dawson said. "I heard you came into a peaceful establishment and started trouble, assaulted a prominent member of this community." Sarah felt the familiar frustration of dealing with corruption, but her years of experience had taught her patience. "Sheriff, with respect, I suggest you talk to the bartender, Tommy, and the other patrons who were present. They'll confirm that I acted in self-defense." "Oh, I've already talked to several witnesses," Dawson said, stepping closer. "And they all say the same thing. You attacked Mr. Holloway for no reason. That's assault and battery. I'm going to need you to turn around and put your hands behind your back." Sarah's mind raced. This was a setup, orchestrated by Derek Holloway using his pet sheriff. She could comply and hope that military justice would sort it out, but she knew how these situations worked. Once she was in their system, in their jail, anything could happen. Evidence could disappear. Stories could change. "Sheriff, I'd like to call my commanding officer before we proceed. As active duty military, there are protocols." "You're on civilian land now," Dawson interrupted. "And you committed a crime against a civilian. You don't get special treatment just because you put on a uniform." Two more vehicles pulled up behind the sheriff's cruiser. Sarah recognized one as the truck Derek had been driving earlier. Her situation was deteriorating rapidly. Derek stepped out, along with Brad, Kyle, and another man Sarah didn't recognize, Sheriff Dawson's deputy, based on his uniform. "That's her," Derek said, pointing at Sarah. "That's the crazy woman who attacked me." Sarah stood her ground, her body relaxed but ready. She was outnumbered 5-1, facing law enforcement officers who had no intention of being fair or honest. But she was also a Navy SEAL who'd been in worse situations. "Mr. Holloway," she said clearly, "you grabbed me without my consent. I have the right to defend myself from unwanted physical contact. If you want to press charges for self-defense, that's your choice. But we both know what really happened in that bar." Derek's face flushed red again. "You broke my wrist, you psycho." Sarah looked at his wrist, which showed no signs of swelling or injury. "Your wrist is fine. If I'd wanted to break it, it would be broken. I used a control hold to remove you from my personal space. That's all." "Enough talking," Sheriff Dawson said. He pulled out his handcuffs. "Turn around now, or I'll add resisting arrest to the charges." Sarah made a quick calculation. Fighting would only make things worse. Running wasn't an option in the middle of nowhere. Her best chance was to comply, insist on her phone call, and get military legal involved as quickly as possible. "I'll comply," she said. "But I'm statting for the record that this is a false arrest, and I'll be filing formal complaints with both military and federal authorities." She turned around and placed her hands behind her back. Dawson cuffed her roughly, tightening the cuffs more than necessary. "Federal authorities?" Derek laughed. "You hear that, Jim? She thinks the FBI is going to ride in and save her." "They all think they're special," Dawson said. "Come on, let's get her processed." As they led Sarah toward the cruiser, Derek stepped close to her, his voice low and venomous. "You embarrassed me in front of my town. That was your first mistake. Your second mistake was thinking anyone would believe a word you say over mine. You're going to learn what happens to women who don't know their place." Sarah met his eyes calmly. "Is that a threat, Mr. Holloway?" "It's a promise," he said. The drive to the Cedar County Sheriff's Department took 20 minutes. Sarah spent the time memorizing every detail: the route they took, the time on the dashboard clock, the conversation between Dawson and his deputy about how to process her. She was gathering evidence, even now. The sheriff's station was a small, dated building on the edge of Cedar Springs. Dawson parked in the back and led Sarah inside through a rear entrance, avoiding the main desk where a night dispatcher might see them. The processing room was exactly what Sarah expected: a small space with a desk, a camera that probably didn't work, and no windows. Dawson uncuffed her and told her to empty her pockets. Sarah complied, placing her wallet, keys, and phone on the desk. "I'd like to make my phone call now," she said. "You'll get your call when I say you get your call," Dawson replied. He picked up her phone and smiled. "Nice phone, military issue." "Personal phone, and that's my property. You have no right to search it without a warrant." Dawson's smile widened. Whoops! He dropped the phone on the concrete floor where it shattered. Accidents happen. Sarah's jaw tightened, but she said nothing. Getting angry would give them what they wanted. "Now let's talk about your options," Dawson said, sitting on the edge of the desk. "You assaulted one of Cedar Springs' most respected citizens. That's a serious crime. You could be looking at real jail time, but Mr. Holloway is a generous man. If you were to apologize to him, maybe make it clear you understand how wrong you were, he might be willing to drop the charges." "I'm not apologizing for defending myself from sexual assault," Sarah said flatly. Dawson's expression hardened. "Watch your mouth. Derek Holloway never assaulted anyone. You just can't handle a man showing you a little attention, probably because you've spent too much time pretending to be one of the boys." Sarah had heard variations of this insult for 16 years. It didn't sting anymore. "I want to speak to a lawyer. I want to contact my commanding officer. And I want proper processing, including documentation of this arrest and my legal rights being read to me." "You'll get all that," Dawson said. "Eventually. First, you're going to spend some time in our holding cell, give you a chance to think about your attitude." He nodded to his deputy, who grabbed Sarah's arm and led her down a hallway to a small cell. The door clanged shut behind her. The cell was exactly what she expected: a metal bench, a toilet, cinder block walls, and one small barred window that looked out on an alley. It was clean enough, at least. Sarah sat on the bench and took a slow, deep breath. This was bad, but she'd been in worse situations. She was a trained Navy SEAL. She knew how to survive hostile environments. She knew how to wait, how to observe, how to plan. And most importantly, she knew that Derek Holloway and Sheriff Dawson had just made a critical mistake. They'd arrested an active-duty military officer on false charges. That would bring attention they didn't want. All Sarah had to do was survive long enough for that attention to arrive. Hours passed. Sarah could hear voices in the station, though she couldn't make out the words. At one point, she heard Derek's distinctive laugh. They were celebrating, probably drinking, convinced they'd won. Around 2 in the morning, the station went quiet. Sarah stood and looked out the small window. The alley was empty except for a dumpster and some scattered trash. Then she heard footsteps in the hallway, multiple sets, moving toward her cell. Sarah stepped back from the door and assumed a defensive stance. Every instinct honed by years of combat training told her that danger was approaching. The door opened. Derek Holloway stood there with Brad and Kyle behind him. All three had been drinking. "Hey there, soldier girl," Derek said, his words slurred. "Thought you might be lonely." Sarah's eyes flicked past them, looking for Sheriff Dawson or his deputy. "Where's the sheriff?" "Jim had to step out for a bit," Derek said, stepping into the cell. "Left me in charge. Said I could have a little conversation with you. Work out our differences in private." The threat was clear. They intended to assault her here in this cell, with no witnesses and no consequences. Sarah had spent 16 years training for combat. She'd faced insurgents, participated in high-risk operations, and survived situations that would break most people. But she'd also spent 16 years learning discipline, learning when to fight and when to wait for a better moment. This wasn't the time to wait. "Last chance," Sarah said quietly. "Walk away now and this doesn't have to get ugly." Derek laughed, still acting tough. "You're locked in a cell, sweetheart. You're not in control anymore." He reached for her. What Derek Holloway didn't understand was that Sarah Mitchell's body was built for war. Every muscle had been trained and conditioned through thousands of hours of the most brutal physical preparation in the world. Her reflexes had been honed in real combat. Her mind had been taught to assess and neutralize threats with lethal efficiency. Derek's hand never reached her. Sarah intercepted it with a speed that caught him completely off guard, using a joint lock that twisted his arm and drove him to his knees. The alcohol in his system made him slow, and his overconfidence made him vulnerable. "Brad, Kyle, get her off me," Derek yelled. Brad lunged forward first, throwing a clumsy punch that Sarah easily avoided. She released Derek and struck Brad with a precise palm strike to his solar plexus, driving the air from his lungs and dropping him to the floor, gasping. Kyle was smarter or more afraid. He stayed in the doorway, his eyes wide with shock. Sarah stood in the center of the small cell, her breathing controlled, her body balanced and ready. "I don't want to hurt anyone else," she said calmly, "but I will defend myself. Get out, now." Derek struggled to his feet, cradling his arm. His face was twisted with rage and humiliation again. "You're dead," he spat. "You're so dead. You just assaulted me again, and this time there are witnesses." "I defended myself against an attempted assault," Sarah corrected. "And you're right, there are witnesses. Your friend Kyle saw the whole thing, saw you come into my cell, saw you try to grab me." Kyle looked between Sarah and Derek, panic on his face. "Kyle won't say a word," Derek said. "Nobody in this town crosses me. Nobody." "Then you have nothing to worry about," Sarah said. "Go ahead and press more charges. I look forward to explaining to a judge, or better yet, a military tribunal, exactly what happened here tonight." For the first time, a flicker of uncertainty crossed Derek's face. He was drunk and angry, but even through the alcohol, he could sense that he'd miscalculated. "Come on," he said to Brad and Kyle. "Let's get out of here. This isn't over." They left, locking the cell door behind them. Sarah heard their voices arguing in the hallway, then the sound of the station's front door opening and closing. She sat back down on the bench, her heart rate already returning to normal. The confrontation had lasted less than 30 seconds. In that time, she'd neutralized 2 threats and avoided causing any serious injury that couldn't be justified as self-defense. But she knew the situation was escalating. Derek was becoming desperate, and desperate men made mistakes. She just needed to survive long enough for help to arrive. What Sarah didn't know was that help was already on the way. At Naval Base Corpus Christi, Commander James Chen sat in his office reviewing training schedules when his phone rang. It was 3:47 a.m. "Commander Chen," he answered. "Sir, this is Lieutenant Morrison from Operations. We have a situation. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell missed her check-in. Her GPS tracker from her personal vehicle shows she's been stationary outside Cedar Springs for the past 6 hours. Chen sat up straighter. Sarah Mitchell was one of his most reliable officers. If she missed a check-in, something was wrong. Have you tried contacting her? Multiple attempts, sir. Her phone goes straight to voicemail. We also contacted local authorities in Cedar Springs. They claim they have no knowledge of her whereabouts. Chen's instincts kicked in. They're lying. Pull her full GPS data and phone records. I want to know exactly where she is and what happened. And wake up Captain Rodriguez. We may need to involve JAG. Yes, sir. 2 hours later, Chen had the full picture. Sarah's GPS showed she'd stopped at Murphy's Bar. Then her truck had been stationary on Highway 77 for approximately 15 minutes before moving to the Cedar County Sheriff's Department, where it remained. Cell tower data showed her phone had been active until approximately 10:43 p.m., then went offline. Captain Linda Rodriguez, the base's senior judge advocate general officer, reviewed the information with a grim expression. They arrested her, she said, and they're stonewalling us. That's illegal detention of a military officer. What are our options? Chen asked. We go over their heads, Rodriguez said. I'm calling the Texas Rangers, and I'm calling the FBI. If they've detained her illegally, we're going to bury them. Back in Cedar Springs, Sarah watched the sun rise through her cell window. She'd been held for over 9 hours without being formally processed, without access to a lawyer, and without her legally required phone call. Every minute they kept her was another violation. She was documenting it all in her mind. Sheriff Dawson appeared at her cell, looking tired and worried. The confident arrogance from the night before had faded. You got a visitor, he said shortly. Lawyer showed up. Don't know how he found out you were here. Sarah stood, finally respecting my legal rights. Dawson didn't answer. He unlocked the cell and led her to a small interview room where a man in a suit waited, but it wasn't just any lawyer. Lieutenant Colonel Marcus Webb, U.S. Navy JAG Corps, stood as she entered. Sarah knew him by reputation. He was one of the most aggressive military attorneys in the Navy, famous for protecting service members from civilian legal overreach. Lieutenant Commander Mitchell, he said, I'm Colonel Webb. I'll be representing you. Don't say anything. We're leaving. Dawson stepped forward. Now hold on. She's under arrest for. For what? Webb cut him off. You never formally charged her. You never processed her. You denied her access to legal counsel and her right to contact her command. You've illegally detained a U.S. naval officer for over 9 hours. I have Texas Rangers and FBI agents en route to this station right now. If you want to make this worse for yourself, please continue talking. The color drained from Dawson's face. Lieutenant Commander, you're free to go, Webb said. He turned to Dawson. I'll be filing formal complaints with the State Bar, the Texas Attorney General, and the Department of Justice. You and Mr. Holloway are going to wish you'd never heard the name Sarah Mitchell. Within 2 hours, Sarah was back at the naval base, being examined by medical personnel and giving a detailed statement to investigators. Her account was supported by security footage from Murphy's Bar, which Tommy had preserved and sent to military investigators. The footage showed everything: Derek grabbing Sarah, her controlled response, and his threatening words afterward. Within a week, the investigation had expanded. Federal investigators discovered that Sheriff Dawson had a long history of misconduct, including several complaints from women about harassment that had been buried. Derek Holloway's businesses were found to have multiple labor violations and tax irregularities. But the most damning evidence came from Kyle, Derek's friend, who finally broke under FBI questioning. He confessed to slashing Sarah's tire on Derek's orders. He described the plan to assault her in the cell, and he provided testimony that Derek had bribed Sheriff Dawson multiple times over the years to ignore various crimes. 2 months later, Sarah stood in a federal courthouse in Houston. Sheriff Dawson had already pleaded guilty to civil rights violations, official misconduct, and illegal detention. He'd been sentenced to 4 years in federal prison and stripped of his pension. Derek Holloway's trial for conspiracy, assault, and witness intimidation was ongoing, but his lawyers were already negotiating a plea deal. His businesses were under investigation, and his reputation in Cedar Springs was destroyed. The judge in Sarah's case, the false charges had been immediately dismissed, called her to the stand one final time. "Lieutenant Commander Mitchell," he said, "I want to personally apologize on behalf of the state of Texas for what was done to you. The actions of Sheriff Dawson and Mr. Holloway were unconscionable and criminal. Do you have anything you'd like to say?" Sarah stood straight, her uniform crisp, her bearing dignified. "Your Honor, I joined the Navy to serve my country and protect people who can't protect themselves. What happened to me was wrong, but I know I'm not the only victim. My hope is that this case prevents other people from being abused by those who think power puts them above the law." The courtroom erupted in applause. In the gallery sat Tommy from Murphy's Bar, several other Cedar Springs residents who'd found the courage to come forward with their own stories about Derek, and a full delegation from Sarah's SEAL team. Commander Chen sat in the front row, pride evident on his face. After the hearing, Sarah walked out of the courthouse to find a crowd of reporters. But she also found something else: a group of women, some in military uniforms, others in civilian clothes, holding signs that read, "Thank you, Lieutenant Commander Mitchell," and "Real courage looks like Sarah." One woman stepped forward, tears in her eyes. "I'm Emily Patterson. Derek Holloway harassed me 5 years ago, and when I tried to report it, Sheriff Dawson threatened me. I was too scared to speak up, but watching you stand up to them gave me courage. I testified against them. Thank you." Sarah took Emily's hand. "You gave yourself courage. You're the one who chose to speak up. I'm proud of you." As the crowd dispersed, Sarah's team gathered around her. Her commanding officer, teammates who'd become family over years of service, and Colonel Webb, who'd fought tirelessly for her case. "You ready to get back to work?" Commander Chen asked with a smile. "Yes, sir," Sarah said, "more than ready." "Good, because we have a training mission in 3 weeks, and I need my best SEAL leading it." Sarah smiled. In the end, that's all she'd ever wanted: to be judged by her abilities, not her gender. To be respected for her strength, not underestimated because of assumptions. Derek Holloway had grabbed her waist thinking she was just another woman he could control. He learned, too late, that Sarah Mitchell's body was built for war. Not just the physical war she trained for, but the war against injustice, corruption, and anyone who thought power meant they could abuse others without consequence. 3 months later, Sarah received a letter. It was from a young woman in Cedar Springs named Jessica, who wrote that Sarah's case had inspired her to join the military. She wanted to be a Navy SEAL, just like Lieutenant Commander Mitchell. Sarah wrote back immediately, offering encouragement and advice. She told Jessica that the path would be difficult, that she'd face people who doubted her, that she'd have to work twice as hard for half the recognition. But she also told her the truth, that it was worth it, that standing up for yourself and others was worth every sacrifice, that a warrior's strength wasn't just physical, it was moral courage, the willingness to fight for what was right even when it was hard. As Sarah sealed the letter, she thought about the scared girl sitting in that cell, facing down men who thought they could break her. She thought about the moment when Derek had grabbed her waist, thinking he'd found easy prey. He'd found a warrior instead. And in finding her, he discovered that underestimating someone based on appearance or gender was the biggest mistake a person could make. Sarah Mitchell returned to her duties with her head held high, her reputation stronger than ever, and her commitment to justice unshaken. She'd faced down terrorists in combat zones and bullies in small-town Texas. She'd won both battles. And somewhere in Cedar Springs, in the rubble of Derek Holloway's empire and Sheriff Dawson's corrupt regime, a new understanding was taking root. That real strength didn't come from money or position or the ability to intimidate. Real strength came from integrity, courage, and the unwavering commitment to stand up for what was right.